I'm going to walk through two examples of how to use sine to solve for a side, and then the second problem is how to solve for an angle, and you need a calculator for both of these. So the first question says, and first of all, these are just all about sine for tonight's homework, so remember sine theta, which is, theta is always an angle, and that's equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Remember, the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. The opposite refers to the opposite from the angle. So for this particular problem, if I'm going to find W, W is my opposite side and 24 is my hypotenuse. The adjacent side is this side here. This is my adjacent side. So I don't want to use that side. Okay, but that would be my adjacent. The adjacent side makes up the angle that you're looking at. You're always, when you do these problems, the idea is you're always standing at the angle. So this is my reference point. So I'm here, and that's what helps me know which side is the opposite. The opposite is always across from it, whereas the adjacent is always touching it. So the adjacent actually makes up one of the sides of the angles, and the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. Okay, so now that I know, I look at this problem, and I know it's sine because I'm dealing with the opposite and the hypotenuse, and sine deals with the opposite and the hypotenuse. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write sine. I write the angle in, which is 20 degrees in this case, and that is equal to the ratio of W over H, which is 24. Sorry, I can write that in. So W over 24. Okay, so now at this point, I'm just going to straight up use my calculator. I can think of this as a proportion, right? And I would cross multiply. So when I put this in my calculator, I'm going to say, in this particular case, 24. Okay, so I'm going to do 24, and then I'm going to go times sine of 20. And that's going to be what W is. So now I literally just go right to my calculator, and I'm going to hit 24 and then times, and then I'm going to hit sine, and then I'm going to hit 20, and then I'm going to hit enter. So 24 times sine 20. I might want to end the parentheses there, and then I'm going to hit enter. That gives me this big old number. So 8.2084. I said round to the nearest integer, so that means I'm going to look at the 2, and that's going to tell me that my W is about 8. Okay? So if your calculator doesn't say the word sine, when you punch this word sine in, you have to do, you're going to have to do 24 times, and then you would hit 20 and then sine. But if your calculator says the word sine, when you hit the word, it'll say in your calculator 24, the little asterisk, and then it's going to say sine equals 20, then that's the best calculator you can have to do this. So I plug this right into my calculator. All right, I don't want you to find out what the sine of 20 is and multiply it by 24. I want you to put that whole thing right into your calculator. Okay, so now, and again, that worked. One of the reasons that worked so nicely for us is because when I multiplied diagonally, there's a number here. Okay, I probably will do an example, and I'll probably do an example on another sheet where there's not a number there. So right now there's a number there, so I would multiply. Okay, the second example is, this is what I would do if I was trying to find the angle. So in this case, I'm looking for the angle. All right, so the angle is there. I would still use my same concept. I'm thinking, you know, the 5 is my opposite, and the 13 is my hypotenuse. So if I want to find the angle, now I'm going to have the ratio, and I'm going to not have the angle. So the idea is I'm going to write the ratio, so I'm going to say sine, and I don't know what the angle is, so I'll put a D there, and that's equal to opposite, which is 5 over 13. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this ratio value, and then I'm going to input that into my calculator, and it's going to tell me the angle. So when I do that, I'm kind of working backwards. So I don't want to find the sine of the angle. I'm trying to get my calculator to tell me what the angle is. So on your calculator, instead of using the sine key, you're going to use the sine with the -1 next to it, which should be right above on your calculator, right above the sign. So this is what you use when you want to find the angle. All right, so you're going to use, it's kind of like the inverse key. So you're giving the calculator the ratio, and your calculator is going to tell you what the angle is. So on my calculator, I'm going to hit the sign of -1, and my calculator says that, and then I'm going to type in 5 divided by 13, and I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to give me a value. So right in my calculator, so this is what I'm actually going to state. I'm going to hit the sign and -1 key, and that's going to show up in my calculator. Then I'm going to do 5 divided by 13, and then I'm going to hit enter. All right, that gave me this big number, 22.619, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about the rest because it says to round to the nearest degree. So therefore, I'm looking at that 6, and that's going to tell me that I want to round up. So my angle is about 23 degrees for that one. Okay, so that's how you would get a typical angle. There's nothing tricky about that one, whereas the one above, that's when you multiply, and then there's a time where we do something else. I'm going to do a different video where I do that. I might add to this one. All right, this is another sign problem. I'm finding x to the nearest, it says integer, that got cut off. So let's see, my reference angle is here at 32. So that's 32 degrees, and then I want to think the 4 is my opposite side, and the x is my hypotenuse in this case. Okay, so I look at it and I say, okay, that's a sign question. So I'm going to write out my ratio. So maybe make sure you tell me the ratio you're using. So sine of 32, so sine of the degrees is equal to opposite 4 over hypotenuse, which I don't know what it is. Okay, so I always think of this as like a proportion. Okay, so now with this problem, I'm going to go and I'm going to look and I say, okay, I'm going to cross multiply. So when I go and cross multiply, look what happens. There's an x there. Okay, so this is different than the one I did in the last page where there was a number there. So when there's a number there, I can multiply, but when there's an x there, it's not going to be a multiplication problem, but I will write out what I have. So, and I'm going to have, so now if I do it the same way, I'm going to have x times sine of 32 is equal to 4. Okay, so, you know, I can't stick that in my calculator and get an answer, but I'm trying to solve for x. So if I was going to solve for x, the next thing I would do would be to divide by the sine of 32. Divide by the sine of 32. Okay, now that's what I'm going to put in my calculator. So for this problem in my calculator, I'm going to put in 4 divided by, and then I'm going to hit my sine key, and I'm going to hit 32 degrees, and then I'm going to hit enter, or my equal sign. And that's going to give me an answer, and I'm going to round it to the nearest degree, or integer. So let's see what that gives me. So I got 4 divided by sine of 32, enter. Again, big long decimal. If you don't get a big long decimal, you're probably doing something wrong. So that gives me 7.5483 and a bunch of other stuff. I don't care about that. I want to the nearest integer, so I'm going to look at the space after the decimal, which is a 5, and that tells me to go up. So x is about 8. Okay, so that's what I would do. So when I'm solving these equations, what I want you to see is there's 2 different ways to do these. So if you look and there's a value, so if you have sine of, 552 equals, x over 12, and there's a value here, you're going to multiply. Okay, so, and then if I do the same thing, right, and I don't have a number in the hypotenuse, and I look and I go to multiply and there's an x there, this is when I'm going to divide. Okay, so what I remember is if x is in the denominator, I'm going to divide. If x is in the numerator, I'm going to multiply. Okay, so the denominator part is what I remember. The d's go together, denominator and divide. so that's the 3 different techniques you're going to use when you have to use a sine. Now you're going to use these same kind of techniques when you do cosine and tangent also. It's just you're going to change what the ratio is. Okay, I hope that helps.